for the others. And we see that there, and we can see, now let's go on straight to Fife Central, and we can see on the first past the post there, Henry McLeish, who is indeed the devolution minister and the deputy leader in Scotland, is safely into the Scottish Parliament with 18,800 votes. Tricia Marwick for the SNP on 10,000 votes. Liberal Democrats on almost 2,000, same as Keith Harding, ex-leader of Stirling District Council, on almost 2,000. And the share there, 57%, plays 31, 6 and 6, and there is no change there. Falkirk East, Cathy Peaty, another woman elected to the Parliament there, on 15,700. Keith Brown for the SNP at 11.5, and the others trailing way down, just a little over 3,500 for the Conservatives. In Falkirk East, the share of the vote, 45 for Labour, 33 for the SNP, 10, 7 and 6 respectively for the others. In Cumbernauld and Kilsyth, Cathy Craigie has been elected on 15,000 votes, beating Andrew Wilson, who is one of the kind of mathematical whizzes of the SNP, who's on almost 11,000 votes, 2,000 for the Liberal Democrats, 1.5 almost for the Conservatives, and the Scottish Socialist Party, Scottish Socialist Party, I should say, Kenny McEwen on 1,000. And there we have the share of the vote there, 49 for Labour, 36 for the SNP. Now we can go straight over to Carol Jones, who has more news from that Perth count on the line. Carol, exactly what is happening in Perth?
Well, Kirsty, we expect the declaration for the Perth constituency in about half an hour's time. I just had a chat with the returning officer about 5 minutes ago, and he said we're on target for 3 o'clock. And the rumour sweeping around the whole, the Bell Sports Centre in Perth, is that Rosanna Cunningham might have lost the Perth seat. The piles for the Conservative candidate and for Rosanna Cunningham have been piling in fairly evenly. We've been walking around the tables, and the votes for Ian Stevenson have been piling up fairly evenly with Rosanna Cunningham, which of course would be a massive blow for the SNP. As we say, they are just rumours at the moment, but they are circulating the whole, and we just have to wait to see what happens in the next half hour when the declaration's made.
Well, of course, this is traditional Tory territory anyway, and of course Rosanna Cunningham, you know, ironically, is still the Westminster SNP MP for Perth, and will probably or possibly get in on the list. But it would be ironic. I mean, have there been any contributory factors? Do you think there was a big campaign got up about the fact that she did not live in the constituency? Has there been personal animosity?
Well, generally, she was regarded as quite a good MP. The fact that she held on to the seat in the 1997 election after gaining it in the 1995 by-election following the death of Sir Nicholas Fairbairn. But there has been a fairly poor turnout. It's just over 60% in Perth. So we don't know whether that's maybe a contributing factor, and that has enabled the Conservative candidate, Ian Stevenson, to gain some ground.
Thank you very much, Carol Jones. We'll come back to Perth as soon as we get any further information. And Lauren Gillis, that would be a psychological blow for the Nationalists, wouldn't it?
Well, obviously it would be an enormous disappointment. It hasn't happened yet, and I still think that we need to keep it in the context of, in general, quite a marked swing towards the SNP, and especially in some of our least likely seats like Glasgow Shettleston, for example.
Great. Well, there we have we have the first Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats have broken their duck, Mingus.
Well, in the North East, there's been some suggestion that the Tories might make advance at the expense of the Liberal Democrats. Gordon looks as if it's stopped any question of that for the moment. And I'd be interested to see the share of the vote and the percentages, because so far we haven't had seats reflected in the overall percentage from the places that we would normally regard as being our heartlands.
We've still to get the absolute details in of that, but Brian Wilson, that would be quite significant for the Liberal Democrats and Gordon.
Yeah, I would expect them to hold Gordon, but Kirsty, we've got a screen in front of us which is the prediction is changing all the time, and I note that the prediction of SNP seats is now down to 36.
Well, we can't actually. I'm afraid these screens are. To a certain extent, some of them have gobbledygook on them, right, and are really not for public quotation.
We shouldn't believe anything we see on the screen.
No, it's like when your pager goes off, you don't believe everything you hear from Millbank.
Oh, yes, it does. Oh, yes,
can I go back? I want to go right back for about 10 results. I must say this, I'm absolutely delighted with the result from the Western Isles. And Anne will keep me right whether the word Runnock can be applied in this context.
Well, Anne, this is your territory. You stood there in
a star is born with Alistair Morrison elected in the Western Isles.
Well, perhaps if you stood in the Western Isles for the Scottish Parliament instead of looking for a European seat, Anne, you might have trounced Labour in the Western Isles?
Who can say indeed? I'm quite sure Alistair will be a Rolnock, a star, as Brian says. We had pretty much a star in our Alistair Nicholson as well, a very experienced man, and he again, although he didn't win, he again raised the percentage of the votes.
Well, at this point, let's just solve Mingus Campbell's dilemma and look at that Gordon result in some detail now. Let's just see if we can pick up the Gordon result. And there we have for Nora Radcliffe, 12,353 against for Sandy Stronach, 8,000 for Alexander Johnson, 6,500, and then for Labour, 3,900, and the Independent, Hamish Watt, 2,559. Now look at the share of the vote there, 37 plays against 24, 20, 12 and 8. Now the change. So Liberal Democrat votes actually down 6%, SNP up 4%,
but the Tories are down 6%.
Conservatives down 6%. What do you make of that percentage drop, Ming Campbell?
Well, I think that may reinforce my view that the expected Tory surge in the North East may have been stopped in its tracks. It's obvious on an occasion when we're voting for the Scottish Parliament, one might expect the Scottish National Party to make some sort of advance, but that's a comfortable victory. It will hearten
the Independent Hamish Watt, ex-SNP, took 8% of the vote there.
Yeah. I believe he's been running a very individualistic style of campaign, and that may account for the fact that he's got 8% of the vote. Also, the other point to remember, the further away you get from Glasgow and the Central Belt, the more people vote for the character of the individual who's standing. And it's perhaps not surprising that someone like Hamish Watt, who I think could reasonably be described, if not a runner, at least as being Ken Speckle.
Right, well, Liam Fox, it looks as if the Conservatives are heading for their worst result ever in Scotland.
Well, we'll wait and see what the results are like, and if we win any first-past-the-post seats tonight, it'll be a good deal more than we had in 1997 at the general election. I'd like to go back, because no one picked up Margaret MacDonald's comments earlier, and when she said that Govan was just another constituency, which of course is nonsense. The SNP threw everything into Govan.
We must go straight over. I must interrupt you, because the Glasgow Baillieston is coming up now at the Scottish Exhibition Centre in Glasgow. Here's the returning officer. This is Margaret Curran here, the Labour candidate.
Here is the result of the election for Glasgow Baillieston constituency. Margaret Patricia Curran, Scottish Labour Party, 11,289 votes. Dorothy Grace Douglas Elder, Scottish National Party, 8,217 votes. Judith Ann Fryer, Scottish Democrats, 813 votes. James McVicar, Scottish Socialist Party, 1,864 votes. Kate Pickering, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 1,526 votes. I hereby declare that Margaret Patricia Curran is duly elected to serve as the member.
Well, let's see that now, that victory for Margaret Curran, who's certainly a character in the Labour Party. That's 11,000 votes for her against Dorothy Grace Elder's 8,000. And we can see the SSP beat the Conservative Kate Pickering, but the Liberal Democrats came down a very poor fifth with 813. And the share of the vote there, 48 for Labour, 35 for the SNP. Let's look at the change there. The change, 18% down for Labour and 16% up for the SNP. Again, that's a heartland Labour territory. Heartland Labour territory, 18 percentage points down. Of course, Margaret Curran, Mohammed Sarwar's agent.
But look, what we're seeing here is the pattern we started the night with, that where there are very big Labour majorities, there are low turnouts, and that has affected the majority. And we could analyse all night why it is, but I think the obvious
Well, it's quite interesting, because I'm sure that's exactly what they'll be doing in Delta House, if not Millbank, for the next 6 months.
It's one of these occasions where the obvious reason is probably the true one, is that people felt less motivated to vote because they did not feel there was a threat to their candidate.
But it will affect the second vote, because if they didn't bother coming out to vote, they certainly didn't come into the polling station and just mark the second paper.
It will have a marginal effect on the.
It might have a marginal
effect on the second vote but unlikely to have in Glasgow. And
because you were so solid, you say, on your constituency
because
vote.
we're so solid in the constituency vote.
But if that's repeated across the country, then that would be a problem for you in the second vote.
Yeah, but the point is, and I think that, I think Brian might endorse this, is that it's not happening across the country, that there's very different regional patterns emerging, and where there is a close fight, then you get completely different patterns. And overall, Labour is doing extremely well where we have to do extremely well.
just look at the swings, Kirsty, you know, as we see there a 13-point swing from Labour to the SNP in Baillieston, 16 percentage swing in Shettleston, but where it matters, in Glasgow Govan and the Western Isles.
Now, look at that, just pick up on that. Labour win Ochil. Now, that was a very big SNP. We expected, SNP expected George Reid to win there, and Lauren Gillis.
My case rests.
That's a big disappointment for you not to get George Reid. He was one of the football team in October 1974.
Yes, he's also
a
very, very able member of our team, and I'm quite sure will be returned on the second vote. And yes, of course, it's a huge disappointment to us after fighting a clean and positive campaign. It is a great disappointment, but I think you will see, I'm looking at my pictures of swings, I'm seeing plus 11 in Dunfermline East, I'm seeing plus 9% in Cunningham South. It's not only just in the Glasgow heartlands that we're seeing, and we're seeing even in Gordon, the SNP up.
Can I just pick up with this with Brian Taylor, because of course this whole idea that what we're going to start to see soon when the second votes come in is the SNPs on the SNP vote on the list will start to kick in.
Three quick points. The SNP have failed now to take their third target seat in Ochil, their second target seat in Glasgow Govan, and there must be a question mark about their top target seat, which is Inverness East, for the reason that the Labour Party vote is holding up in that northern half of the country, so it doesn't look as if that's a banker either. The second point, the Scottish Socialist Party are doing relatively well in Glasgow. It looks like Tommy Sheridan will get in on the list. And the third point, the SNP are doing proportionately better on a sort of broad basis and must pick up some list seats. But frankly, they're not going to pick up very many on first past the post.
David Denver, what does it look like from your perspective?
The point that Brian was making is that Labour do better where they need to. And that was a pattern that actually got established in 1997 general election and helped to explain the big landslide. I mean, the interesting question from my point of view is why? Is it that the voters are aware of the kind of constituency they're in and are therefore making kind of rational choices? Or is it because the party's very good at campaigning and focusing the campaigning, focusing resources on the kind of seats where it really matters? Because there clearly is a difference between those kinds of seats.
Could it possibly be...
Yes, I was going to make a point about this question of people failing to win target seats and then getting in on the list. I can't help but think there will be a certain amount of resentment in the minds of the public. If you remember when Charles Kennedy won Ross and Cromarty, Hamish Gray, who was his opponent, was immediately put into the House of Lords and made a minister in a government department. And there was a very considerable amount of public anxiety about it.
It's slightly bizarre. It's not slightly bizarre that you're saying this, because you, of all parties, the parties have been campaigning for proportional representation since time immemorial.
We have 129 candidates. We've got candidates standing in every first past the post seat, but we've also got candidates standing for every one of the available list seats. It's those parties who've chosen only to put forward a limited number of candidates who may be the beneficiaries of this. And I think there may be some public resentment at the notion that people get beaten and then pop up as members of the Scottish Parliament on the second.
It'll be interesting to see how they operate, because they're not operating in constituency terms, how they're going to operate across a region, and how they're going to effectively, clearly represent the people they are actually elected to represent. I mean, it's going to be rather weird way.
And also, if they rather think they might go back to these same seats to fight in 4 years, are they going to be in these seats doing their best to try and stir things up?
So you stand in the constituency, you don't stand in the list. You stand in the constituency, you shouldn't stand in the list.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is absolutely rich.
That's the only way you were going to get in.
This is the system. It's a system that the Liberal Democrats were championing in the House of Commons when the bill was going through. They were saying this is wonderful, it's a great system. Now they say there's going to be great public resentment.
That's what PR. I'm not saying that's a gross misrepresentation.
Not to distinguish QC needs a case, anyone to help him with his defence, but I mean the point Ming is making is distinct from that. He's not criticising the system. What he's criticising is that people who have lost in a specific constituency within the system are then going to crop up, in a different guise and say, here we are, you beat us yesterday, but we're back tomorrow.
Can I just say, Brian Wilson, Donald Dewar was on representing a constituency, but just in case there had been a complete disaster, Donald Dewar was top of the list. So I mean, Labour are perfectly capable of doing exactly the same thing.
I don't honestly think that's the reason he was top of the list, because if there was a complete disaster in Donald's constituency, it would have been a real disaster.
It would have been a complete disaster generally.
But the point on this is that ground rules are going to have to be established, because you can't have people who have been beaten by the electorate going around cherry-picking cases in the constituencies.
People might. Well, actually, people. I'm going to take the Ochil result. Before I take the Ochil result, the whole point point about the second vote, surely, is that people can actually make perhaps a different choice, the kind of person they want to see in a regional, on a regional list.
Yes, exactly. They can do. Yeah, they can do.
Yes, exactly.
But it's when it gets down to the nuts and bolts, I think Ming was commenting
they have
on.
that list clearly in
how
front
they
of
then
them when they
perform.
vote.
Well, let's look at this Ochil result in some detail now. There we have it, that Richard Simpson has 1 Ochil on 15,300. George Reid, SNP, on 14,000. Conservatives and Liberal Democrats trailing far behind. And on the share of that vote, Labour in 42, SNP in 38, 11 for Conservatives, 9 for Liberal Democrats. And the change there, Labour down 3, SNP up 4, Conservatives down 3, and Liberal Democrat up 4. Now we are hearing now another unconfirmed rumour that Aberdeen South has gone from Labour to Liberal Democrat.
That's
and
consistent
from
with my
Anbeg to
information.
Nicholl Stephen. So Nicholl Stephen will make it back into the politics of power. Nicholl Stephen, you might remember, was a short-lived Liberal Democrat MP in a by-election out on a general election. Mingus Campbell, that's consistent with your view of the North East.
Yeah, and also with informal information that's been reaching me. It would be a great triumph for Nicholl Stephen.
You've Liberal Democrat winning Ross Skye, Inverness West.
Well, I mean, that is also very interesting because, of course, Donny Munro, whom Charles Kennedy beat in the general election, was thought
So
to
one
be a very
Munro beats
powerful
another. John
candidate
Farquhar Munro
there.
meets Donny Munro.
And of course, the SNP had high hopes there as well. Indeed, I think on one of the Scotsman's predictions about a fortnight ago, that was a seat that was supposed to go to the SNP. So it rather looks as if in our heartlands, Liberal Democrats are defending extremely well. And if we won Aberdeen South, and as I say, it's a triumph for Nicholl Stephen, who won the old Kincardine and D-side, lost it in the general election, and has managed to come back.
This
is
of course,
a very good night for him.
is unconfirmed reports, certainly, but
if we won it, it would be
Ross
good
and
for
Skye is certainly not unconfirmed, and that's another blow to you, Brian Wilson. You don't have Donny Munro in your team.
I think it's a great blow. I think it's personally, I think it's it's a huge loss. I think Donny Munro is someone who's got a tremendous amount to offer to this Parliament. He took a fantastically principled position. He was offered a very safe seat in Glasgow by a local constituency, and he turned it down because he wanted to fight in his home territory. And I had no effort to hide my personal.
Can I just say we can go straight over to Aberdeen now, and we're going to have a look here at Nicholl Stephen, who's standing there. Waiting patiently for the declaration. Sorry, Brian, I interrupt you. We haven't quite got the declaration yet. Do carry on.
Doesn't look as if he's lost there, does he?
I just say that I'm very sorry about Donny Munro. I'm also sorry that Donny was opposed to John Farquhar Munro, who I know very well as an old friend of mine, and I wish him well. But I wish Donny was going to be there, and I think that for that area, that the team of Alistair Morrison and Donny Munro would have been fantastic in what they would have done politically for the West Highlands and Islands, in which I have some residual interest.
Well, presumably the team of the Liberal Democrat team presumably will do their own way. And Mingus Campbell, at this point, as the Liberal Democrat seats start to come back now, we should really return to a talk about coalition politics.
Well, why?
And well, I think it's quite interesting to return to, because frankly, that's the only way presumably you're going to maintain power in the Scottish Parliament.
But the results aren't in, and until all the results are in, there should be no talk about agreements or arrangements or coalitions or anything of that kind.
So
until we know what the final result is. Then it makes no sense to start talking in these terms.
But you certainly wouldn't talk about it necessarily before the polls closed, because you felt the electorate should be given this straight choice. But you take something like tuition fees. I mean, the people that vote for you expect you now to do something about tuition fees if you enter a coalition with Labour. And what they do expect you to do before you enter the coalition with Labour is vote with the other two parties and vote down tuition fees.
Well, if the Labour Party fail to get an overall majority...
Well, let's look now at the constituency of the Secretary of State for Scotland, Glasgow Anniesland. He's coming forward and the declaration is about to be made.
Here is the result of the election for Glasgow Anniesland constituency. William Aiken, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 3,032 votes. Edward Boyd, Socialist Labour Party, 139 votes. Ian Brown, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 1,804 votes. Donald Dewar, Scottish Labour Party, 16,749 votes. Anne Lynch, Scottish Socialist Party, 1,000 votes. Cookab Stewart, Scottish National Party, 5,756 votes. I hereby declare that Donald Dewar is duly elected to serve as the Member of the Scottish Parliament for Glasgow Anniesland constituency.
So there we have it, the man who would be First Minister in a Scottish Parliament but is certainly not yet. And let's hear what he has to say.
I wish to thank the returning officer, members of his staff, stewards, the police and the emergency services. I want to thank them for the long hours put in tonight and the smoothness and efficiency of the count. It's been a long night, an historic night in many ways, but this important stage in our country's story also depends on the work that these services do, and I thank them. Counting not one but two ballots seems to me perhaps to be a cruel and unnatural punishment, but I of course also recognise there is more in store tomorrow, so I do thank them for their good temper and for their skill and expertise. I also want to thank my opponents who fought very, I was going to say tolerant, but they might resent that, but very, very civilised contest in the Anniesland seat. But especially I want to thank my constituents in Anniesland. They have given me great support over the years. They have become friends in that period, and I am very, very grateful. I also want to thank my election agent, John Robertson, and his team and all the Labour Party workers. It's always difficult conducting a campaign, maintaining momentum, maintaining enthusiasm, when the candidate inevitably is away for very lengthy periods of time in other parts of Scotland. They did it magnificently, and I must say from all accounts, and all the people who have spoken to me, they did an absolutely first-class job. We are starting to see the emergence, ladies and gentlemen, a picture of the new Scotland, but it would be premature for me to speculate about its final form. We will need to wait a bit longer and into the morning. But the first 6 words of the Scotland Act read simply, "There shall be a Scottish Parliament," and with those 6 simple words, Scottish politics are forever changed. And I am proud that my party, and I am proud personally to be associated with that change. Because of those 6 simple words and the votes of our people tonight, Scotland is a very different place. Let us look at this night and see it's a key point of the democratic renewal of the British Constitution and its civil institutions that began with the election of a Labour government in May 1997. And I want to pay tribute to Tony Blair, whose unstinting support was an enormously important part of the process of achieving that Parliament and delivering that Parliament. I also want to remember my friend, the late John Smith. I think he would have been very proud to see this happening now, see this Parliament elected safely tonight, and he would have realised that indeed the settled will of the Scottish people was being achieved. We're on our way to building the sort of new Scotland we have always wanted to, and the sort of new Britain we have also wanted. So let all of us in Scotland begin this morning, after a time for rest and perhaps a time for calculation, and maybe even a time for counting. Let us start building the new Scotland, remembering on all sides that civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof. Let us together work for those who have placed the trust in us, the Scottish people. This is our first democratic Parliament in Scotland for some 300 years. Our people have waited for it. Our people deserve it. We must give them what they want. We must struggle to deliver their legitimate ambitions, their hopes. I pledge myself to do so, and I look forward immensely to the period that lies ahead. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you, the people of Anniesland.
And there we have it, Donald Dewar, Secretary of State for Scotland, now the MSP for Glasgow Anniesland, paying tribute to the late John Smith and using his words, the settled will of the Scottish people, paying tribute to Tony Blair. We could probably look at that result in a little more detail in a few moments' time. But if I just say just briefly about the Anniesland vote, we can't actually see the result there, but we see that certainly the Labour vote is down, Brian Taylor, 3 percentage points, and the SNP gained the commensurate 3 percentage points.
And the SNP are up 3. And there's a story coming through from the night as well, that in the seats where the Labour Party is well ahead, its vote is going down pretty substantially. You know, when it has a 20-point lead, its vote is going down substantially. The seats it needs to win, it's hanging on. Now, that, of course, will have implications for the second vote. The SNP, they're having some disappointments now with Ochil, Govan, etc., the Western Isles. those battalions of nationalist members of the Scottish Parliament might begin to come in.
There's
on the
Labour,
second
that's
vote.
at Motherwell and Wishaw. That means that Jack McCall, the former General Secretary of the Labour Party, is safely returned to Motherwell and Wishaw.
And the picture generally as well for the Labour Party, you know, OK, they're getting some great results, no doubt about it. Govan, Falkirk West apart, but their vote is still down on 97 because of the Shettlestons, the Bailliestons, etc., where the vote is being depressed. The SNP at the present moment, their vote's up about 6 points.
But do you buy
on
Brian Wilson's view that, OK, you know, you can't extrapolate much from this, it's down where Labour is safe because people feel, well, we actually don't need to turn out, and that therefore doesn't have any impact in the second vote? Or do you think there actually could be some disaffection with New Labour in these areas which are still of high unemployment in Glasgow? Shettleston, Baillieston, Govan.
No, I mean, I don't buy that argument, because if people were convinced of the importance of turning out and voting for Labour in large numbers, they would do it. And it's the Labour Party, by diligent targeting and by careful allocation of resources and by good hard work on the ground, has managed to hang on hang on is the wrong word, has managed to win seats like Ochil and Govan and the Western Isles, where they were facing a contest. But there's going to be a second election tonight. That's the incredible thing. Get these 73 seats out of the way, and then there's a second election to come, and that could be a completely different election.
And that is actually will be an incredibly important second half, and actually will change the whole shape of things. So if people are thinking, we know what's going to happen, we don't know what's going to happen.
If I could just comment briefly, and I know Brian Wilson has gone to be replaced by the redoubtable John Maxton, but I do think it is a little bit rich of Brian Wilson and Ming Campbell to be sitting nodding in agreement in criticism of a system which they helped to draft in the Constitutional Convention. But those people being elected are a consequence of the AMS.
It's not the system, it's the fact that some parties chose not to put up a full list of candidates. We did not do that. We chose to put up a full list, a full 129. That's the point. And I think there will be some.
Andrew Wilson joins us as the Scottish National Party. Do you accept that criticism from Mingus Campbell?
Well, hardly. I mean, I think the system is a fair voting system, which all the parties who were behind the referendum backed, and I think it's producing a result where you'll get the best members of the Scottish Parliament possible. That's what we're all interested in. What the SNP has brought to the campaign is seeking to make the Parliament a huge success, and that's what we must now focus on, is how to make the Parliament successful.
We're going straight over to Dumfries now for the result there.
Sorry, I would stand in front of you, Dr. Murray, if you would just move to the side. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the result of the Dumfries constituency. I will read the candidate's name, the party, and the number of votes attained. I, James Maguire Smith, being the returning officer for the Dumfries constituency, hereby declare that the votes cast were as follows. David Mundell, Conservative, 10,447. Elaine Murray, Scottish Labour, 14,101. Stephen Norris, SNP, 7,625. Neil Wallace, Liberal Democrats, 6,209. And I hereby declare Elaine Murray elected to serve the constituency of Dumfries.
Yeah, Aberdeen Dumfries there, fighting off a Conservative challenge. This, of course, was originally a Conservative seat when Sir Hector Munro was alive. Elaine Murray there with 14,000 votes against David Mundell with 10,000. And moving down there, Stephen Norris, and Liberal Democrat there, Jim Wallace's brother, Neil Wallace, polling 6,000 votes. Let's look at the share of the vote there. 37 for Labour, playing 27 for the Conservatives, 20 for the SNP, 16 for the Liberal Democrats. And the change, Labour down in that rural territory, Conservatives down 1, SNP up 8, Liberal Democrats up 5 percentage points. Another good win. John Maxton, we haven't heard from you. That's another woman back to the Scottish Parliament.
Yes, I'm delighted. I mean, a number of our decision to have...
and another one there, Paisley North, yeah. Wendy Alexander.
Good. I'm delighted to see Wendy getting in. I mean, she'll be a real asset in the Parliament. But the fact is that the decision we took to ensure that we had equality or near parity of women and men in the seats is working out, that we are actually going to have a large number of women in this new Parliament. And I think that's an excellent thing.
David Dender.
Sorry, I was just looking at the Paisley North figure, which it conforms to the kind of standard pattern that we started off with. Well, I mean, I know it's a very marginal issue, and unfortunately the Conservative spokesperson's just gone, but I mean, I just think it is worth emphasising that when the Conservative Party can't win Eastwood back and can't win Dumfries, which was for donkey's years a safe Conservative seat, I mean, it really shows the depths to which they've sunk, really. I mean, this was a first-past-the-post election.
I must say that we're temporarily without Conservative representation in this panel. Never mind Conservative representation in Scotland.
It might be worth pointing out.
I'm afraid he's done a bunk, but it was actually...
after Dumfries.
Might be worth pointing out, however, to you, Kirsty, that I think Sir Hector Munro is still alive, by the way.
I'm terribly sorry, did I say that? So retired, rather. I'm terribly sorry Sir Hector Munro's watching
Can we also
tonight.
point out that in the general election, the Tories got 18% of the vote. Tonight, they're getting 13%.
Yeah.
They're actually doing 5% worse than they did in the
What
general
is their
election,
worst result?
which was their worst ever result in Scotland.
Maybe we should place ourselves into the mind of the voters in these constituencies who are traditional Conservative voters, and they look at the manifestos of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, don't see much difference. And in actual fact, if you take tuition fees an issue, they are further to the right than the Tories, so it's no surprise that Labour are entrenching themselves in traditional Tory areas and losing elsewhere across the country.
Losing? We haven't lost a single seat.
Well, you're losing a considerable amount of support.
The distancing of the Scottish Conservative Party from what was going on down south was only part of the story, because in fact the repositioning of people like Peter Lilly and so forth returning the... Oh, excuse me, I have to interrupt myself there and go straight to the Glasgow Springburn result.
John Roderick Macaulay Brady, Scottish National Party, 6,375 votes. Matthew Gilmer Donegan, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 1,288 votes. James Charles Anthony Friel, Scottish Socialist Party, 1,141 votes. Paul Martin, Scottish Labour Party, 14,268 votes. William Murray Roxburgh, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 1,293 votes. I hereby declare that Paul Martin is duly elected to serve...
Well, look at that there, that's in Glasgow Springburn. That means that Paul Martin represents the area for the Scottish Parliament, and his father, Michael Martin, represents it at Westminster. That's Labour there in 14,000. The others trailing far behind. And looking at the share of the vote, 59% for Labour. We can go straight over to Perth now. We're about to hear the radio declaration.
The Scottish Parliamentary constituency of Perth declare that the result of the election held in the said constituency is as follows. Charles Gilchrist Brodie, Scottish Liberal Democrat, 3,558 votes. Rosanna Cunningham, Scottish National Party, 13,570 votes. Gillian Richards, the Scottish Labour Party candidate, 8,725 votes. Ian William Stevenson, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 11,500. 11,543 votes. I therefore declare Rosanna Cunningham to be duly elected.
Well, Andrew Wilson, a little scare for you there?
Well, not for me. I think the Conservatives want to look maybe at their briefings, because our ballot box sampling from early on had Rosanna winning.
Well, actually, I'm afraid some of these rumours stem from Delta House, so there's a bit of misinformation.
As I said, the Tories seem to be clubbing together tonight. Nonsense. So I think it's no surprise. Rosanna's done brilliantly throughout her period in Perth, and it's no surprise that she's done it again tonight. She's a redoubtable figure, and will take some beating over the next few years, I'll tell you.
Brian Taylor.
Yes, this is a good result for the SNP to hold on. An intriguing result as well for the Liberal Democrats. I mean, against in an area where you were expected to be squeezed out in a fight with the parties who had the majority of the votes there, the SNP, the Conservatives and the Labour Party. The Lib Dems are actually up 1.5, which could tell a reasonable story for them over the rest of the night. I mean, this fight for third and fourth, this fight for who's going to be the kingmaker or the prince, and it looks like the Lib Dems doing pretty well on the night so
And
far.
remember who Charles Brodie is. He's the Charles Brodie, Chick Brodie, who was the adopted Liberal candidate for Hill Head, who stood down in favour of Roy Jenkins all those years ago. And there he is, doing a pretty creditable result. He's been out of Scotland for quite a long time. He's come back. Very creditable result.
Well, at the end of that Perth result, we're actually going to just take a pause for a moment and forecast what we think the final result might be. Here we have Peter Snow. Peter.
Right, Kirsty, now we're going to fly in the air above the Royal Mile, all the way down from Edinburgh Castle to glimpse tomorrow's world in Scotland, which is where the new chamber of the Scottish Parliament will be 2 years from now. They're meeting up the top of the hill for a couple of years, but this is where they'll be. And let's go inside the Holyrood Parliament, and we've got a picture of the design of it now from the great Barcelona architect who designed it all, with the help of Scottish architects as well, I need hardly say. And let's have a look at what will be inside here in the way of members of the Scottish Parliament. First of all, the Labour Party, with, under Donald Dewar, we reckon 57 seats for Labour. Then the Liberal Democrats, with 16 seats under Jim Wallace. The Liberal Democrats, that's our first forecast, precisely of what we think they're going to get. The Conservatives on 18 under David McLeish, and the Scottish National Party under Alex Salmond with 37 MSPs. Let's take a bird's eye glimpse of this now and bring in the halfway mark. 129 of them altogether, so 65 is the number you need for an overall majority. Labour on 57 will be short of the winning post, as you can see, 8 short of the winning post. The Liberal Democrats, with 16 members of the Scottish Parliament, in collaboration with Labour, whether formally or informally, in coalition or informal pact, will clearly give the Labour Party, in association with the Liberal Democrats, control of this Parliament. The Tories on 18, the others on 1, the SNP over here on 37. Now, let's just for a moment switch the Liberal Democrats over so that they sit next to the SNP, just to see for a moment how far short of the winning post, if you come from the other side, the SNP and the Liberal Democrats together, if they were to form some kind of agreement, would be from the winning post. And you can see that they're pretty short of it, 16 and 37. Quick bit of arithmetic here makes 53, so they're pretty well short of the winning post. It really is Labour and the Liberal Democrats, if they can get together and cooperate, who look like controlling this Parliament. Kirsty.
Thanks very much indeed, Peter. And now we can go over and talk to Alex Salmond in a few minutes' time. But we'll look at that Perth result first, because we can actually see it now before we go over to Alex Salmond. And there we have it, Rosanna Cunningham on 13,500, beating the Conservative. Ian Stevenson, 11,500. There's another Paisley win, Labour win there in Paisley South coming up. And Labour on 8,700. And Liberal Democrat Chick Brodie there on 3,500. Now let's look at the share of the vote. SNP on 36, 31 for the Conservatives, 23 for Labour, Liberal Democrat 10%. And the change, SNP, no change, Conservatives up 2, Labour down 1, Liberal Democrats up 1. So Rosanna Cunningham is actually safely returned. Now we can look at Donald Dewar's vote there. Labour 16,749, beating Colcab Stewart, 5,756 for her. Conservatives, Bill Aiken 3,032, and the Ian Brown for the Liberal Democrats 1,804, and the others 1,300. And again, Labour on 59, SNP on 20, and so forth. Now the change there, Labour down 3 against 3 percentage points up for the SNP in the Secretary of State's constituency, Conservative down 1, Liberal Democrat down 1. We can go over to the SEC and see Cathcart declaring now. That's Lord Watson.
Here is the result of the election for the Glasgow Cathcart constituency. George Callan Dick, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 2,187 votes. Mary Fiona Leishman, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 3,311 votes. Roddy Slorrock, Socialist Workers' Party, 920 votes. Michael Goodall-Watson, Scottish Labour Party, 12,966 votes. Mary Catherine Whitehead, Scottish National Party, 7,592 votes. I hereby declare that Michael Goodall-Watson is duly elected to serve as a member of the Scottish Parliament for the Glasgow Cathcart constituency.
There we have it, and Mike Watson is back to elected politics. We can go straight over to the Galloway declaration now.
So for the Scottish parliamentary election in Galloway and Upper Nithsdale, hereby give notice that the total number of votes polled for each candidate in the Galloway and Upper Nithsdale constituency was as follows. Alexander Charles Onslow Ferguson, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 10,672. Joan Mitchell, Scottish Liberal Democrat, 3,562. Alistair Neil Morgan, Scottish National Party, 13,873. James Stevens, Scottish Labour Party candidate, 7,209.
We have it there. SNP has held on to Galloway and Upper Nithsdale with a majority of 3,200. Let's look now at the share of the vote there in Galloway and Upper Nithsdale. Perhaps we can't get that yet. Okay, we can't get that. SNP are down 4.6 percentage points in Galloway and Upper Nithsdale. We hope to bring you more details about that in a moment. And I think we can probably now go back to Andrew Wilson and say, well, you'll be obviously delighted with Galloway and Upper Nithsdale.
Over the moon for Alistair, who's done a great deal of work in that area, and it's confirming our position when he won it at the last election, so I'm delighted for him. There's no surprise, there's some slight slippage in the support there because there's no tactical vote there against the Conservatives, who are obviously no threat and wiped out at the moment, so I think it's a good result for the SNP, confirming our position, and we'll go on to build from there.
David Denver, did you get any intelligence out of that slight drop there? There's Labour win Clydebank and Mulgara.
Yeah, I mean, it's odd that in quite a number of seats that the SNP hold, that they've actually been losing support, and I think it's kind of connected with what Alex Salmond was saying earlier, which in a sense you hit a ceiling, and it's rather difficult to improve from that point, and you're open then to people being fed up with you perhaps not doing as well as you might have on this or that or the other.
We must just go to the pictures there and see Donald Dewar arriving at Delta House and congratulating all the workers there who've gathered to meet him. Yeah, well, I mean, wiping the mock sweat from his brow, I hardly think he was particularly worried about certainly his own position, and with a lot of the night still to go, he might even speak to some of his supporters. I think indeed he is perhaps going to say a few words, but whether we'll be able to hear them or not, I'm not very sure. Here we go.
Help. Thank you very much, all of you. That's the first thing to say, because I've been kind of wandering around the countryside, being pleasant to people, and you've been making it happen, and you've been working, and you've been succeeding. I think it's a very, very good night for us. If you look at the fact it's a mid-term election, look at all the pressures and all the difficulties, and maybe all the points where we might have come off the track. I mean, I think we can take enormous satisfaction from what is happening here. And if we look at what's happening in other parts of the country, you can see how well we have held together and how strongly we have built our base for this new Scottish Parliament. And as I watched these results coming in, I was ticking them off, the ones that secretly I'd been worrying about. Eastwood, terrific. Ochil's, terrific. How do I put it? Govan, deeply satisfying. Yeah, a fair way of putting it. And let's not forget some of the others, because they represent real advances for us. You know, victories that we got for the first time last election, and we thought in our heart of hearts might be hard to hold. But now we've held them, and we can begin to see them as part of the Labour family in Scotland. I'm thinking of seats like Dumfries, for example, which we had to work very, very hard. And maybe we surprised ourselves a wee bit last time. It was the first time we had ever won it. We've done it again, and we're going to do it again and again and again.
Here we have Donald Dewar rousing the troops at Delta House.
So I'm
still going. We can still stay with him for a bit.
I'm just enormously pleased about what has happened. Can I say to you, there's still a lot of hard work to be done. There's a lot of quite difficult tactical situations that we've got to look to. And none of us can predict exactly what the shape is going to be until we see the final results. The list system will clearly present some problems. It will throw up new forces in Scottish politics. But we have got our solid phalanx. We have got our Praetorian Guard in place, and they have failed totally to enter our heartland and have victories there, and that is just enormously important to us.
Well, we'll wait and see. It's still a long way to go. Here we have it. He talks about tactical situations. What he actually means is horse trading. And when he talks about new forces, I think he might be talking about Dennis Canavan.
I've been refusing to talk to the press at all tonight. I don't know what these people are doing here. They've just slipped in unnoticed. So I'm going to leave it there. We will obviously be keeping the party very much in touch with what is happening. As I say, we'll be doing some counting in the morning. We'll be looking to see what the shape is. But above all, I promise you this, that whatever happens, our aim will be to deliver our manifesto, to do what we said we would do in terms of land reform, of health and education, of building the Scottish economy. And I don't know, as I say, exactly how it will pan out, but that will be right centre stage at the heart of everything we do. And I think we can say that with some confidence, and we can say that because of your work and your enthusiasm and your dedication over the last month and 5 weeks. And I'm grateful. Maybe that doesn't matter very much, but I think an enormous number of people round Scotland, people who perhaps have been disadvantaged in the past, have struggled a little bit because of circumstance and social pressures of one sort or another. I think they'll be one hell of a glad and hell of a grateful to you. So thank you very, very much indeed. And maybe you should think of getting some sleep sometime. I recommend it to you.
There we have it. Donald Dewar, Secretary of State for Scotland, now an MSP in the Scottish Parliament. Probably is a very safe bet that he will indeed be First Minister. And waiting patiently to speak to us from the northeast is Alex Salmond, the leader of the SNP. First of all, Alex Salmond, after the misguided reports we got, you must be delighted that Rosanna Cunningham has been returned in Perth.
Well, obviously I was delighted for Rosanna, but I was more puzzled by your half-hour debate on her political demise. I mean, you shouldn't believe the rumours, whether they emanate from Delta House or anywhere else. I mean, the Tories are doing nothing in this election. That's clear to anyone in a rural constituency. But obviously Rosanna's a fine member of Parliament. It's an outstanding result, and well done.
You were saying earlier on that you were disappointed in Govan. You didn't get Nicola Sturgeon back on the first vote, nor George Reid, nor Alec Neil.
Yes, can I say I've been listening for the last half hour as you were speculating about Rosanna to the debates on the panel, and I'm not quite certain if you've caught up with the nature of this election campaign. This is a proportional election. This is an election where a vote in Glasgow Shettleston, where our vote is up about 16%, is as important as a vote in Banff-and-Buchan. And we fought this as a national election to get a national party group returned. Obviously we couldn't target seats in certain constituencies because we had to fight in every constituency in Scotland. And by the early hours of this morning, Kirsty, that decision is going to be vindicated by the number of SNP people who returned on the list system. We've fought a national election and a national campaign.
So, Alex, you're not unduly concerned about not winning on the first past the post. You were content to come in on the lists.
Well, I think the average swing that you've recorded this evening, in some cases in Glasgow it's even more than that, is going to approach the sort of swing that Labour got against the Tories at the last election in the UK. It's of gigantic proportions, approaching 10%. Now that's a massive swing in a general election, and I think when we get to the list situation and the list count, you'll see that reflected for the first time, that the SNP will be rewarded in seats for the votes we're getting across Scotland. But instead of fighting a targeted election in certain constituencies, we fought a national campaign for Scotland's national election.
Well, earlier on this evening, what you didn't hear was Ian Blackford in the studio here, your treasurer, and he was saying that when the SNP get into Holyrood, you're going to make sure that you mix it up a bit. How do you think you're going to mix it up a bit?
Well, let's see the complexion of new Parliament. I think Holyrood's maybe a few years away, Kirsty, but when we get into the new temporary Parliament building, the SNP will see the building process of confidence in making that Parliament work. Now, we'll see the complexion of the administration tomorrow, but I can be absolutely certain now that the only party gaining ground in this election is the Scottish National Party. Every other party is losing ground, and some of the Labour results in their heartland constituency, once Donald gets a chance to look at the fine figures, it may cause him some sleepless afternoons.
And tell me, Alex, at this stage, are you prepared to say whether or not and how early you'll be pushing for a referendum on independence?
Well, let's look at the results, Kirsty. I mean, I don't think any of us at this stage know what the second vote's going to do. But can I give you one prediction at, what is it, it's 20 past 3. One prediction at 20 past 3. I think this election night has a few surprises yet in store, particularly when we get to that second ballot.
Can I just, before we finish, take you back to the Murray result, Margaret Ewing's result. And that was a surprise that it was down 3 percentage points. She's a very popular local MP and so forth. Do you think that your policy of outright opposition to NATO's involvement in Kosovo had an impact in that constituency, perhaps?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a very particular situation in Murray with the large military bases, and I just wonder if the NATO's admission today that the bombing campaign hasn't helped the Kosovo Albanians or achieved its objectives, if that had come a few days earlier, then we might have had a very different story even in Moray. But across Scotland, of course, the SNP vote has advanced stupendously in many constituencies, which I think is a vindication of the approach we've taken to many issues in this campaign. I think speaking the truth and telling it as you see it is the right thing to do in politics. One last point on that. I noticed 2 days ago that Nelson Mandela joined the criticism of the NATO tactics. I think I'm in rather good company, Kirsty.
Well, Alex Salmond will be speaking to you a little later in the morning. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We can go now straight over to Colin White, because in fact the Liberal Democrats, Mingus Campbell's here, but the Liberal Democrats won North East Fife. Colin White.
Thank you very much indeed, Kirsty. Well, I'm joined here by the President of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, Roy Thompson. And Roy, I understand here in the North East at least, you're expecting some good news later.
Oh yes, indeed. Things are looking very good for us all the way around. And the Tories have really targeted this area, and they're not doing very well.
Well, when William Hague was here, when he came to the Fainston Marks near Inverurie during this campaign, he said this is where the Tory revival was going to start, if anywhere.
Yes, certainly he was not at all vague about it, Mr. Hague, and he was wrong. There is no revival that we can see any signs of starting here, and so that augurs well for the rest of Scotland, I would say, and certainly for us. But above all else, we're doing very nicely, thank you, in this patch, and we're very content tonight so far.
Well, it looks as though you're going to win your key target seat of Aberdeen South. Nicholl Stephen returned to the Scottish Parliament.
I'm sincerely hoping so. I'm quietly confident at the moment, yes.
And Gordon's been won, and it looks as though West Aberdeenshire will go to you as well.
We are reasonably hopeful about that as well. So that could mean that we could possibly take yet another one. So right now, I'm a very happy man.
And 16 seats we're projecting for the Liberal Democrats in Scotland?
I think it'll be at least that.
And you're happy with that?
I'll be happy with quite a lot more than that, but certainly that's a beginning.
And the coalition talks begin this weekend?
Well, we'll see. The first thing we do is we meet together as a party, and we decide on what we are going to do next.
Well, thank you very much indeed. We're expecting the results here for Aberdeen North and Aberdeen Central within about the next 20 minutes, and then it'll be about another hour and a half before we hear Aberdeen South. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Colin White. Now we can go straight over to John Pienaar, who's at the SNP headquarters. John.
Thank you, Kirsty. And watching the results and listening to the party leaders, two SNP supporters, we have Donald Fletcher from Islay and Deanne Waters from here in Edinburgh. Let me just put it to you, the situation as it seems to be unfolding so far. Donald Dewar seemed to be a fairly happy man. You, I guess, must be a fairly disappointed one.
No, I couldn't say that, John. I think the SNP have certainly increased their vote overall. They have to be quite happy with that and can certainly look forward to the future.
But there was a time not so long ago when it looked so much brighter for the SNP, didn't it?
Well, I think it's looked quite bright for them all the way along, really. They've stuck to their policies, etc. They've certainly had a hard go with the media, but that's going forward now.
What do you think, Dan? I mean, Alex Salmond talking just a moment ago about the statements on Kosovo and so on. Were they terribly helpful to the SNP campaign?
Well, I don't know. I think he hasn't done himself any favours in many ways, but he's a man of principle. And I think that we've managed to promote ourselves in very many different ways. And the thing about the SNP is now that we're making advances, unlike the Labour Party, in this election. And I think we have to take time, and we'll get there.
Obviously, it's easy to look back with the benefit of 2020 hindsight and say this went wrong and that went wrong. But when you say the campaign didn't do itself many favours, what do you have in mind?
Well, unfortunately, you say things with principle, and sometimes principle doesn't do you any good when you're actually looking for a campaign election. But I think Alex Salmond has done extremely well in this election, and I think we have done extremely well in this campaign, and I think we can look forward, if not in this election, but the next election, to make an advance in every level that we can.
Let's just look for a moment at what seems to be a pretty low turnout for these elections. For someone who, like you, is obviously very enthusiastic for the project and ultimately independence, it is a bit dispiriting, is it not?
I think probably, John, the negative campaigning that's been going on, people are getting fed up with it. They thought this was going to be a whole new approach, you know, to electioneering, etc. But it's not been the case. They've got down to the old dirty slagging again, haven't they, really?
Donald Fletcher, Deanne Waters, thank you very much. Kirsty, back to you.
Thanks very much. Well, before we move on and talk about a bit of Tory grief tonight, Mingus Campbell, that result in North East Fife, your territory.
Any chance of getting the detail of it?
Well, we don't actually have the
figures.
details on the screen at the moment.
I have
we're waiting to have the
informal figures that have
details.
been sent to me.
Pardon?
I've got informal figures that have been sent to me, but I wouldn't want to rely on
No, well, tell me what you think the percentage.
The Lib Dem vote is down by
Yeah,
about
I was just gonna
13 points, and the Tory down a bit as well. Again, it's the Nationalists who are up, the Labour vote also.
We've got it now. We can actually see it now. We can actually see that now, and there we have it, 13,500 for Ian Smith. Conservatives, Edward Brocklebank on 8.5, SNP on 6,373, and Labour 5,175. 38 for the Liberal Democrats, 24 for the Conservatives, 18 for the SNP, 14 for Labour, 6 others. The change, yeah, the Liberal Democrats down 13, Conservatives down 3, up both beneficiaries of that, the SNP and Labour. Mingus Campbell, well, I mean, that's your territory, and you're down a massive 13 percentage points.
Well, I wonder if we're beginning to see a pattern in which, where seats are apparently safe, other parties make some kind of inroads. We saw that in respect of some Labour seats in Glasgow.
The electorate's sending a very clear message.
We saw that in Rosanna Cunningham's seat, for example, where apparently a safe seat was turned into something a little more cliff-hanging. And I think there may just be the electorate saying, well, this is a different kind of election. You may have a very substantial majority for Westminster, but actually we're just going to remind you that you shouldn't be taking us for granted. I would like to say about Ian Smith...
That doesn't quite explain the Conservative vote.
Well, that's gone down there as well, of course, although I understand they were going around today saying they were confident that they had won. But the point, if I just briefly say, Ian Smith's been my agent in 2 elections, responsible for my majority of over 10,000 and 52% of the vote. I'm delighted that he has won election himself to the Scottish Parliament, where he will make a very substantial contribution.
We're soon going to get the result where Tommy Sheridan's standing, the Scottish Socialist Party. But first, we go for an update from Peter. Peter.
At the seats so far and the totals, 44 results in. Here they are building up on the map. Labour pretty successful in that central belt. None of those going down to the SNP as they feared. Here are the Labour constituency seats so far, 36. 4 for the SNP, none for the Conservatives so far, 3 for the Liberal Democrats, and there's Dennis Canavan over there on the right. Now, watch the top-up seats coming down in a moment. The top-up seats, of course, there aren't any yet declared, but I'm going to show you the forecast of them in just one moment now. Here come the forecast seats now for all the various parties. First of all, there we have the total for the Labour Party, 54 plus 3 over there, 7 plus 29, 29 top-up seats for the SNP there. Back to you, Kirsty, for a result.
James King, Scottish Liberal
Let's just
Democrats.
take up Glasgow Pollok now. This is Tommy Sheridan's territory.
Joanne McDougall Lamont, Scottish Labour and Cooperative Party, 11,405 votes. Rory O'Brien, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 1,370 votes, and Thomas Sheridan, Scottish Socialist Party, 5,611 votes.
That is actually less than Tommy Sheridan was expected even by Labour to do. Joanne Lamont there, home with 11,405 votes. Kenneth Gibson on 6,700. Tommy Sheridan third with 5,600. And the others trailing. Now let's look at the share of the vote there. 44 for Labour, 26 for the SNP, 22 for the SSP, sorry. And the change, 16 down for Labour, 8 up for the SNP, 10% up for the Scottish Socialist Party, and the others 1% down for the Conservatives, Liberal Democrat. No change. John Maxon, a slight sigh of relief there?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there was any chance of us losing Pollok. But I think Campbell's point, he's now gone, that in our safe, solid seats, we did not get our vote out. I don't think it's a matter they were disillusioned. They simply said, we're going to win, so why bother coming out? Where our voters had to come out to ensure we either held the seat, like in Govan or Ochil and so on, they came out and they voted for us. And in those seats, we've done well. One other point, of course, which is interesting, is that the lowest drop in our safe seats has been in those seats where the sitting Member of Parliament is our candidate. Donald's seat in Anniesland, John Hume Robertson in East Lothian, and Henry McLeish in Central Fife.
Rather than the devil
well, there's an element of that. Certainly, I had somebody phone me up.
Maybe you should have stood.
Oh no, well, I had somebody phone me up and say, "Have you retired? Can I wish you all the best?" Constituent, can I wish you all the best in your retirement?
Well,
I said,
essentially,
no,
perhaps you have retired, because what are you going to do at Westminster from now on anyway?
Well, I can assure you, being on the Culture, Media and Sports Committee and being a member of the Chairman's panel keeps me very busy indeed in Westminster.
Andrew Wilson, you're shaking your head vigorously.
Well, I just think it's important to make a distinction in the cuts that Mingus Campbell was referring to. What you're seeing there, as in our seats, is a changeover from the Tory tactical voting to keep the Conservatives out. That's no longer an issue. What you're seeing in Labour seats is hardly a tactical voting to keep the Conservatives out. What you're seeing, for example, there is Kenny Gibson recording a 12% swing from Labour. Now that's a very bad result for you, John. In fact, pretty awful, if you're being honest.
But
a 12% swing against
the
Labour Party is a bad result.
It's a disastrous night for the. I mean, Alex Salmond sat there and talked about what a good night it was for him. He was the man who, right up to Wednesday, Alex Salmond was claiming he was going to sweep to victory.
Look,
right throughout the whole campaign, he was winning.
Sorry, everybody barring the Conservatives were saying they were going to sweep to victory.
John, call me a traditionalist, but when your vote goes up in the night and yours goes down, I tend to think that means we're doing not too bad.
Well, listen, let's intrude a little bit of it. Well, I was about to say expectation, perhaps travelling expectation rather than anything else. But I'm afraid your expectations of a reasonable night for the Conservatives in terms of hauling yourselves back up by your bootstraps simply hasn't happened.
A few minutes ago, Ming was sort of mildly gloating that the Conservatives are doing very badly. On your own projections, the Conservative Party is going to come from nothing to being the third party. The Liberals are going to become from being the third party to being the fourth party.
It is slightly hard to consider. You say that the Conservatives are going to come from nothing. Well, of course, they must be coming somewhere, because on a proportional system like this, it'd be quite extraordinary if you didn't return some MSPs. The problem for you is that there's very unlikely you're going to return any from the constituencies.
Well, neither I nor you know that yet, but we've got to make a decision at some point. Is an MSP who is elected on the list system as worth the same thing as one who comes direct from a constituency?
Well, what do you think? You don't believe in PR. What do you think?
We don't believe in PR. This is not the system we would have chosen, but we had no choice. We had to go for the system that we had.
Tell me, do you think if you handed PR, you'd come back any better?
One way around the system was that every single Conservative who's on the list had to stand in a seat. We're the only party who actually did that.